Erya perched on the rocky outcrop, her gossamer wings shimmering faintly in the moonlight. For centuries, her kind had existed in the hidden corners of the world, shunning human contact. Humans were loud, clumsy, and often destructive, qualities that clashed with the delicate harmony her species cherished. Erya had been taught from her earliest days to avoid humans at all costs. Her elders spoke in hushed tones of their unpredictable nature, of greed and wars that had razed forests and poisoned rivers. The Fae believed that no good could come from humans. But tonight, curiosity tugged at her. A human campfire flickered in the valley below, its light dancing in the gentle breeze. Despite the distance, she could hear faint laughter and the strumming of a stringed instrument. The sound carried an unfamiliar warmth. "Don't be foolish," she muttered to herself. Yet, her wings fluttered, and before she could reconsider, she was gliding silently through the night sky. The human's name was Rowan, a traveler and musician seeking inspiration. He'd chosen this remote valley for its tranquility, unaware of the ancient beings that watched from the shadows. Rowan's fire crackled merrily, and his voice, soft and rich, sang songs of faraway lands and unfulfilled dreams. Hidden behind a thicket, Erya watched. Her heart, long steeped in distrust, softened slightly at the sight of him. He was alone, with no weapons in sight. His presence lacked the malice her kind had always warned of. As the night wore on, Rowan's music faltered. He sighed, staring at the embers, then reached into his pack to retrieve a loaf of bread and some cheese. Erya's stomach growled softly. She'd been too preoccupied with her vigil to notice her own hunger. "You out there?" Rowan suddenly called. Erya froze, her wings pressed tightly against her back. Rowan stood, his eyes scanning the darkness. "I can't see you, but I've felt eyes on me all night." Erya remained silent, debating whether to flee. But Rowan chuckled, a warm, unthreatening sound. "If you're hungry, I have more than enough to share. No strings attached." He placed a piece of bread and cheese on a flat rock near the fire, then retreated to his seat. Erya waited, her instincts warring with her curiosity. Minutes passed, then an hour. Finally, hunger won. She crept forward, her movements as silent as falling snow. Snatching the food, she darted back into the shadows. Over the next few nights, this tentative interaction became routine. Rowan would leave out food, and Erya would take it. Each time, she lingered a little longer, drawn by his music and gentle demeanor. Rowan began speaking to the darkness, sharing stories of his travels and struggles. "I left my village because it felt too small," he confessed one night. "But sometimes, the world feels too big." His voice carried a melancholy that resonated with Erya. Against her better judgment, she began to respond. At first, her voice was barely a whisper. "Why do you wander?" she asked from the safety of the shadows. Rowan smiled at the sound. "To find where I belong," he replied simply. As days turned into weeks, Erya grew bolder. She allowed Rowan glimpses of her, a flash of wings here, a glimmer of silver hair there. Rowan, for his part, respected her caution. He never approached or pressured her, content to let their friendship grow at her pace. One evening, a storm rolled in. The valley was soon drenched in rain, and Rowan's meager shelter barely kept him dry. Erya watched, torn. Her kind had little use for material possessions, but she knew of a dry cave nearby. Finally, she swooped down, startling Rowan. "Follow me," she urged, her voice carrying over the howling wind. Without hesitation, Rowan gathered his belongings and trailed after her. She led him to the cave, lighting the way with the faint luminescence of her wings. Inside, as the storm raged outside, Rowan marveled at his first close look at Erya. She was ethereal, with delicate features and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Erya nodded, her mistrust slowly eroding. You're different from the humans my kind warned me about, she admitted. Rowan chuckled. I'm sure most humans aren't as bad as the stories say. And not all Fae are as kind as you, I'd bet. For the first time in centuries, Erya smiled. The storm marked a turning point. Erya and Rowan's friendship deepened, and she began to share more about her world. She showed him the hidden beauty of the valley. Crystal-clear streams, groves of ancient trees, and flowers that glowed softly in the moonlight. In return, Rowan taught her human songs and stories. He spoke of bustling cities and festivals, of art and inventions that amazed her. Slowly, Erya's fear of humans transformed into curiosity. But not everyone was pleased. The other Fae had noticed her growing attachment to Rowan. One evening, Elder Mirren confronted her. You endanger us all, he warned. Humans cannot be trusted. They take and destroy. Not all of them, Erya argued. Rowan is kind. He values the things we do. Mirren's eyes hardened. If he truly values us, he will leave. If he stays, it's only a matter of time before others follow. Erya's heart ached. She knew the elder's concerns weren't unfounded. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to sever her bond with Rowan. The decision was taken from her. One morning, a group of hunters arrived in the valley, drawn by rumors of magical creatures. They found Rowan's camp and, mistaking him for a guide, demanded he lead them to the Fae. Rowan refused, earning their suspicion. When they found Erya's footprints near his camp, their anger grew. They accused him of harboring the Fae and threatened violence. Erya watched from the shadows, her heart pounding. She knew she couldn't fight the hunters directly. Instead, she used her magic to create illusions, phantom lights and sounds that lured the hunters away. In the chaos, she and Rowan fled. Safe in another hidden glade, Rowan turned to Erya. I'm sorry, he said. I never wanted to bring danger to you or your kind. Erya shook her head. You're not to blame. Fear and ignorance drive humans to act this way. But perhaps kindness can change that. Rowan's eyes met hers. Do you believe that? I do now, she replied, her voice firm. Rowan decided to leave the valley, knowing his presence would continue to attract danger. Before he departed, he promised to share stories of the Fae not as dangerous creatures, but as protectors of nature. Maybe, one day, humans and Fae can coexist, he said. Erya's heart ached at the thought of losing him, but she nodded. And when that day comes, you'll always be welcome here. As Rowan disappeared into the horizon, Erya felt a pang of sorrow but also hope. She returned to her kin, determined to bridge the divide between their worlds. Years later, whispers of a human bard who sang songs of peace and unity reached the Fae. Erya smiled, knowing Rowan's kindness had sown the seeds of change. One evening, as she sat under the stars, the faint notes of a familiar melody drifted through the air. Her heart soared as she turned toward the sound. There, standing at the edge of the glade, was Rowan, his lute in hand and a hopeful smile on his face. I told you I'd come back, he said softly. Erya's smile widened. And you're still welcome here. Under the starlit sky, Fae and human reunited, a symbol of what could be, a world where understanding and kindness triumphed over fear.